a Wikividi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando Jr. was an American actor and film director. He is credited with bringing realism to film acting and helping to popularize the Stanislavski system of acting, having studied with Stella Adler in the 1940s. Regarded for his cultural influence on 20th-century film, Brando's Academy Award-winning performances include that of Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront and Don Vito Corleone in The Godfather. Brando was an activist for many causes, notably the civil rights movement and various Native American movements. He initially gained acclaim and an Academy Award nomination for reprising the role of Stanley Kowalski in the 1951 film adaptation of Tennessee Williams' play A Streetcar Named Desire, a role that he originated successfully on Broadway. He received further praise for his performance as Terry Malloy in On the Waterfront, and his portrayal of the rebellious motorcycle gang leader Johnny Strabler in The Wild One proved to be a lasting image in popular culture. Brando received Academy Award nominations for playing Emiliano Zapata in Viva Zapata, Mark Antony in Joseph L. Mankiewicz's 1953 film adaptation of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and Air Force Major Lloyd Groover in Sayonara, an adaptation of James Michener's 1954 novel. Brando was included in a list of top 10 money-making stars 3 times in the 1950s, coming in at number 10 in 1954, number 6 in 1955, and number 4 in 1958. The 1960s proved to be a fallow decade for Brando. He directed and starred in the cult western film One-Eyed Jacks, a critical and commercial flop, after which he delivered a series of box office failures, beginning with the 1962 film adaptation of the novel Mutiny on the Bounty. After 10 years, during which he did not appear in a successful film, he won his second Academy Award for playing Vito Corleone in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather, a role critics consider among his greatest. The Godfather was then one of the most commercially successful films of all time. With that, and his Oscar-nominated performance in Last Tango in Paris, Brando re-established himself in the ranks of top box office stars, placing 6th and 10th in the money-making stars poll in 1972 and 1973, respectively. Brando took a 4-year hiatus before appearing in The Missouri Breaks. After this, he was content with being a highly paid character actor in cameo roles, such as in Superman and The Formula, before taking a 9-year break from motion pictures. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, Brando was paid a record $3.7 million and 11.75% of the gross profits for 13 days' work on Superman. He finished out the 1970s with his controversial performance as Colonel Kurtz in another Coppola film, Apocalypse Now, a box office hit for which he was highly paid, and which helped finance his career layoff during the 1980s. Brando was ranked by the American Film Institute as the 4th greatest movie star among male movie stars whose screen debuts occurred in or before 1950. He was one of 6 professional actors, along with Charlie Chaplin, Ronald Reagan, Lucille Ball, Frank Sinatra, and Marilyn Monroe, named in 1999 by Time magazine as one of its 100 most important people of the century. He died of respiratory failure on July 1, 2004, at age 80. Early life. Brando was born on April 3, 1924, in Omaha, Nebraska, to Marlon Brando, Sr., a pesticide and chemical feed manufacturer, and Dorothy Julia. Brando had 2 older sisters, Jocelyn Brando and Frances. His ancestry was German, Dutch, English, and Irish. His patrilineal immigrant ancestor, Johann Wilhelm Brandau, arrived in New York in the early 1700s from the Palatinate in Germany. Brando was raised a Christian Scientist. His mother, known as Dodie, was unconventional for her time. She smoked, wore trousers and drove cars. An actress herself and even a theater administrator, she helped Henry Fonda begin his acting career. However, she was an alcoholic and often had to be brought home from Chicago bars by her husband. In his autobiography, Songs My Mother Taught Me, Brando expressed sadness when writing about his mother. The anguish that her drinking produced was that she preferred getting drunk to caring for us. Dodie and Brando's father eventually joined Alcoholics Anonymous. Brando harbored far more enmity for his father, stating, "I was his namesake. But nothing I did ever pleased or even interested him. He enjoyed telling me I couldn't do anything right. He had a habit of telling me I would never amount to anything. Brando's parents moved to Evanston, Illinois, when his father's work took him to Chicago, but separated when Brando was 11 years old. His mother took the 3 children to Santa Ana, California, where they lived with her mother. In 1937, Brando's parents reconciled and moved together to Libertyville, Illinois, a small town north of Chicago. In 1939 and 1941, he worked as an usher at the town's only movie theater, the Liberty. Brando, whose childhood nickname was Bud, was a mimic from his youth. He developed an ability to absorb the mannerisms of kids he played with and display them dramatically while staying in character. He was introduced to neighborhood boy Wally Cox, and the two were unlikely closest friends until Cox's death in 1973. In the 2007 TSM biopic, Brando, the documentary, childhood friend George England recalls Brando's earliest acting as imitating the cows and horses on the family farm as a way to distract his mother from drinking. His sister Jocelyn was the first to pursue an acting career, going to study at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. She appeared on Broadway, then films and television. Brando's sister Frances left college in California to study art in New York. Brando had been held back a year in school and was later expelled from Libertyville High School for riding his motorcycle through the corridors. He was sent to Shattuck Military Academy, where his father had studied before him. Brando excelled at theater and did well in the school. In his final year, he was put on probation for being insubordinate to a visiting army colonel during maneuvers. He was confined to his room, but snuck into town and was caught. The faculty voted to expel him, though he was supported by the students, who thought expulsion was too harsh. He was invited back for the following year, but decided instead to drop out of high school. Brando worked as a ditch digger as a summer job arranged by his father. He tried to enlist in the army, but his induction physical revealed that a football injury he had sustained at Shattuck had left him with a trick knee. He was classified 4F and not inducted. New York and acting. Brando decided to follow his sisters to New York, studying at the American Theatre Wing Professional School, part of the dramatic workshop of the New School, with influential German director Erwin Piscator. In a 1988 documentary, Marlon Brando, The Wild One, Brando's sister Jocelyn remembered, he was in a school play and enjoyed it. So he decided he would go to New York and study acting, because that was the only thing he had enjoyed. That was when he was 18. In the A&E biography episode on Brando, George England said Brando fell into acting in New York because he was accepted there. He wasn't criticized. It was the first time in his life that he heard good things about himself. Brando was an avid student and proponent of Stella Adler, from whom he learned the techniques of the Stanislavski system. This technique encouraged the actor to explore both internal and external aspects to fully realize the character being portrayed. Brando's remarkable insight and sense of realism were evident early on. Adler used to recount that, when teaching Brando, she had instructed the class to act like chickens, and added that a nuclear bomb was about to fall on them. Most of the class clucked and ran around wildly, but Brando sat calmly and pretended to lay an egg. Asked by Adler why he had chosen to react this way, he said, "I'm a chicken, what do I know about bombs?" Despite being commonly regarded as a method actor, Brando disagreed. He claimed to have abhorred Lee Strasberg's teachings. Brando was the first to bring a natural approach to acting on film. According to Dustin Hoffman in his online masterclass, Brando would often talk to cameramen and fellow actors about their weekend even after the director would call action. Once Brando felt he could deliver the dialogue as natural as that conversation, he would start the dialogue. In his 2015 documentary, Listen to Me Marlon, he said before that actors were like breakfast cereals. He was calling them predictable. Critics would later say this was Brando being difficult, but actors who worked opposite would say it was just all part of his technique. Early career, 1944-1951. Brando used his Stanislavski system skills for his first summer stock roles in Sayville, New York, on Long Island. Brando established a pattern of erratic, insubordinate behavior in the few shows he had been in. His behavior had him kicked out of the cast of the New School's production in Sayville, but he was soon afterwards discovered in a locally produced play there. Then, in 1944, he made it to Broadway in the bittersweet drama I Remember Mama, playing the son of Maddie Christians. The Lunts wanted Brando to play the role of Alfred Lunt's son in Oh Mistress Mine, and Lunt even coached him for his audition, but Brando's reading during the audition was so desultory that they couldn't hire him. New York drama critics voted him Most Promising Young Actor for his role as an anguished veteran in Truckline Cafe, although the play was a commercial failure. In 1946, he appeared on Broadway as the young hero in the political drama A Flag is Born, refusing to accept wages above the actor's equity rate. In that same year, Brando played the role of Marchbanks alongside Katharine Cornell in her production's revival of Candida, one of her signature roles. Cornell also cast him as the messenger in her production of Jean Anouilh's Antigone that same year. He was also offered the opportunity to portray one of the principal characters in the Broadway premiere of Eugene O'Neill's The Iceman Cometh, but turned the part down after falling asleep while trying to read the massive script and pronouncing the play ineptly written and poorly constructed. In 1945, Brando's agent recommended he take a co-starring role in The Eagle Has Two Heads with Tallulah Bankhead, produced by Jack Wilson. Bankhead had turned down the role of Blanche DuBois in A Streetcar Named Desire, which Williams had written for her. To tour the play for the 1946-1947 season, Bankhead recognized Brando's potential, despite her disdain for method acting, and agreed to hire him even though he auditioned poorly. The two clashed greatly during the pre-Broadway tour, with Bankhead reminding Brando of his mother being her age and also having a drinking problem. Wilson was largely tolerant of Brando's behavior, but he reached his limit when Brando mumbled through a dress rehearsal shortly before the November 28, 1946, opening. "I don't care what your grandmother did," Wilson exclaimed, "and that method stuff, I want to know what you're going to do." Brando in turn raised his voice and acted with great power and passion. "It was marvelous," a cast member recalled. "Everybody hugged him and kissed him. He came ambling off stage and said to me, 'They don't think you can act unless you can yell.'" Critics were not as kind, however. A review of Brando's performance in the opening assessed that Brando was still building his character, but at present fails to impress. One Boston critic remarked of Brando's prolonged death scene, "Brando looked like a car in Midtown Manhattan searching for a parking space." He received better reviews at subsequent tour stops, but what his colleagues recalled was only occasional indications of the talent he would later demonstrate. "There were a few times when he was really magnificent," Bankhead admitted to an interviewer in 1962. "He was a great young actor when he wanted to be. But most of the time I couldn't even hear him on the stage." Brando displayed his apathy for the production by demonstrating some shocking onstage manners. He tried everything in the world to ruin it for her, Bankhead's stage manager claimed. He nearly drove her crazy, scratching his crotch, picking his nose, doing anything. After several weeks on the road, they reached Boston, by which time Bankhead was ready to dismiss him. This proved to be one of the greatest blessings of his career, as it freed him up to play the role of Stanley Kowalski in Tennessee Williams' 1947 play A Streetcar Named Desire, directed by Elia Kazan. Bankhead had recommended him to Williams for the role of Stanley, thinking he was perfect for the part. Pierpont writes that John Garfield was first choice for the role, but made impossible demands. It was Kazan's decision to fall back on the far less experienced Brando. In a letter dated August 29, 1947, Williams confided to his agent Audrey Wood, "It had not occurred to me before what an excellent value would come through casting a very young actor in this part. It humanizes the character of Stanley in that it becomes the brutality and callousness of youth rather than a vicious old man." A new value came out of Brando's reading, which was by far the best reading I have ever heard. Brando based his portrayal of Kowalski on the boxer Rocky Graziano, whom he had studied at a local gymnasium. Graziano did not know who Brando was, but attended the production with tickets provided by the young man. He said, "The curtain went up and on the stage is that son of a bitch from the gym, and he's playing me." In 1947, Brando performed a screen test for an early Warner Bros. Script for the novel Rebel Without a Cause, which bore no relation to the film eventually produced in 1955. The screen test is included as an extra in the 2006 DVD release of A Streetcar Named Desire. Brando's first screen role was a bitter paraplegic veteran in The Men. He spent a month in bed at the Birmingham Army Hospital in Van Nuys to prepare for the role. The New York Times reviewer Bosley Crowther wrote that Brando as Ken is so vividly real, dynamic, and sensitive that his illusion is complete, and noted, out of stiff and frozen silences he can lash into a passionate rage with the tearful and flailing frenzy of a taut cable suddenly cut. By Brando's own account, it may have been because of this film that his draft status was changed from 4F to 1A. He had had surgery on his trick knee, and it was no longer physically debilitating enough to incur exclusion from the draft. When Brando reported to the induction center, he answered the questionnaire by saying his race was human, his color was seasonal oyster white to beige, and he told an army doctor that he was psychoneurotic. When the draft board referred him to a psychiatrist, Brando explained that he had been expelled from military school and had severe problems with authority. Coincidentally, the psychiatrist knew a doctor friend of Brando. Brando avoided military service during the Korean War. Early in his career, Brando began using cue cards instead of memorizing his lines. Despite the objections of several of the film directors he worked with, Brando felt that this helped bring realism and spontaneity to his performances. He felt otherwise he would appear to be reciting a writer's speech. In the TV documentary The Making of Superman, the movie, Brando explained, however, some thought Brando used the cards out of laziness or an inability to memorize his lines. Once on The Godfather set, Brando was asked why he wanted his lines printed out. He responded, "Because I can read them that way." Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?